Hi guys, this is Anti-Safi'jiiva and today I'll be sharing a couple of my favorite builds post-Safi'jiiva. Take a deep breath. The critical, status, master's touch, no-sharpen, makes sense. Whew. Yeah, so folks who have been following this channel for a long time know that I love putting together status-based sets. In fact, I still remember doing 4-man Shadowbinder longsword hunts with my hunting buddies while rocking mixed Banhabra sets back in Monster Hunter Tri. Yep, good times. On that note, I decided to put together two different Master's Touch sets, both with critical status to boot. Basically, I've done a lot of Safi'jiiva hunts over the break, and then looked at the buttload of Safi'jiiva status glaives in my box. Then I started to rub my hands. Like a B-movie villain. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, we're poisoning, sleeping, blasting, and paralyzing again, baby. Now these two sets actually combine two older sets I've been using for some time now. One is my high affinity double poison set, which comes with critical status as well as poison duration up. That thing's a lot more toxic than Britney Spears and works even better with the new Safi'jiiva weapons. The other is a variation on my basic Master's Touch set from way back when. This is a tweaked version of the set I've been using with my glaive, hunting horn, etc., which I have now been using with my Safi blast glaive. This one happens to be a lot of fun too, but could use a bit more evil in it, if you know what I mean. By the way, if you'd like me to do a video about the double poison set, just let me know in the comments. It's a lot of fun, but I don't want to make this current video too long, adding one more set to talk about. Speaking of talking, if my voice sounds hoarse, it's because I got a cold. Or maybe the flu, I have no idea. Merry Christmas! There are a lot of kids in my family. Anyway, the idea behind these two sets is to combine critical status with Master's Touch, and then add in a ton of affinity so I crit for 100% and don't have to sharpen during the hunt. Basically, I initially put these together for my Safi status insect glaives, because it can be a bit of a pain to constantly soften body parts with a light weapon, especially against aggressive monsters like Rajang or Yangaruga. That being said, it can work for any Safi melee weapon, although you'll need to add in a few tweaks to squeeze in weapon-specific skills that don't come in an all-purpose build like these two. For example, Focus or Slugger. Anyway, these sets are good for folks who want to play more like base Monster Hunter, you know, back when you primarily just hit weak points without softening. Granted, you will still want to soften when you can, due to the added damage and flexibility you get from doing so. But for the times when you can't, this is a great way to constantly get critical damage and not have to sharpen your weapon to boot. By the way, one alternative is to use Safi armor to get high affinity when your weapon is drawn out, but the sets in this video are nice to have for folks who don't want to deal with the constant HP seesaw that comes with using Dragon Vein or True Dragon Vein Awakening. Yeah, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up. Then again, Dragon Vein sets can be quite fun in their own right as well. Now on to the builds. Now the first step for both sets is to get a Safi weapon and then upgrade and augment it until you have 30% affinity. In my case, all it took were 2 affinity upgrades, using Safi'jiiva drops, and then 1 regular affinity increase, 1 augment, using the Guiding Land materials. So basically the old-fashioned augmenting too, kind of combine both. The 30% affinity is important because this means you can now get up to 70% always-on affinity when you add critical I7 to the mix, and then 100% affinity on non-softened weak spots with weakness exploit 3. Now some might consider this overkill because you can get 100% affinity with weakness exploit 2, provided you soften a body part. But like I said earlier, I want to get to 100% without having to soften, which is why I went ahead and added weakness exploit 3. Speaking of Overkill, which is actually the name I use for this build, this set also has latent power 3. I consider this more as a bonus because Teostra armor naturally comes with it, but the cool thing about it is that it gives you another 30% always-on affinity when it triggers. That means you now have a total of 100% always-on affinity, and you got latent power 3 going on. So you can now hit any part of the monster, including non-weak points, and still crit. In fact, it's quite hilarious when your weapon hits a hard part and bounces but still crits, which means you don't lose any sharpness. The 50% reduction in stamina depletion is also nice for weapons that use a lot of stamina. Yeah, usually I prefer something like Agitator over latent power, but in this case, it's sort of like just like an extra thing that sort of comes as a package deal, especially because of the armor pieces that you use. Naturally, I also have maxed out critical boost in there to add another additional 15% of critical damage, meaning each critical hit now does 40% more damage than a regular hit. Every other skill is pretty much optional, and you can change them to whatever you want or need. For example, for the first set, I maxed out its status attack, which in this case is poison, in order to improve its proc rate. Naturally, you can sub in any other status weapon like paralyze, blast, or sleep. In fact, paralysis and blast are my two favorite status elements. I just ended up using poison for the first set because I happen to have a level 4 Venom Jewel Plus, which I didn't have for the other status conditions. But having this makes the set easier to put together. You'll also notice that I use a blast bug instead of a poison bug. I figured that I have more than enough poison from the weapon, so I'd rather get the more consistent blast damage from my bug. Especially since when the monster is poisoned, you technically can't apply poison attack again, so at least until the poison wears off. So yeah, I just went with the blast bug. It's like having your cake and eating it too. For armor, the first set uses 3 Teostra pieces for Master's Touch, and then 1 Artian piece for critical status from Ancient Divinity. For the second piece of Ancient Divinity, I just added it to my status weapon via one of the upgrade slots, so I can swap out the second Artian piece for the much better Yangaruga legs. Yep, I love those Yangaruga legs. It's like I stick them in everything. But it's just so good. Plus I love fighting Yangaruga. Yeah, I'm crazy. Crazy like a chicken. Anyway, for the rest of your weapon upgrade slots, feel free to slot in attack, status effect, or whatever skill you'd like. But I just happen to have these for now. So here's the final result with the set I have. Even with just 1 attack augment, base attack reaches 884, which is excellent for a status glaive, and is almost within reach of Iceborne's high attack glaives. Except it doesn't suffer from negative affinity like most of those glaives do. It can also go up to about 1178 with a Power Charm, Power Talon, Mega Demon Drug, Might Seed, and Demon Powder. And then it can go even higher if you eat Attack Up L at the canteen before a mission. Performance-wise, when using this set with the Poison Safi Glaive, I was able to poison Namiel once 4 times, and that was with a solo hunt. Of course, your mileage will vary depending on the monster and how aggressive you play, but I found it to work quite well overall. By the way, I also have a variation of this set that I use for Safi'jiiva hunts, and it works really well. So basically, when I'm fighting Safi'jiiva, I usually use a sticky heavy bowgun set for the first hunt to help KO the monster and damage the head and wings. And then for the second and oftentimes decisive hunt, I switch to a slashing melee weapon so I can help cut the tail. And then since I used the first set with my poison glaive, it works really well because poison works nicely against Safi'jiiva. Anyway, what I do in order to sort of make this set better against Safi is that I simply swap out the poison decorations with Part Breaker, and then I'm good to go. Now for the second set. So for this one, I make one switch. Instead of putting Ancient Divinity in my weapon, I actually put in Teostra Technique. This means I am now using only 2 Teostra armor pieces, but now have to use 2 Artian pieces instead of just 1. I also decided not to add any status attack up in my Safi weapon and added a second attack up upgrade instead, just to see how it changes. Of course, feel free to change stuff for your weapon as well. Anyway, this means that I now have a weapon with a base attack of 915, and then it goes past 1200 when I'm using a Power Charm, Power Talon, Mega Demon Drug, Might Seed, and Demon Powder. The only issue is that I lost some level 1 slots, and also don't have a level 4 Blast Deca to boot, so I only got to Blast 3, I believe, and then Latent Power 2. And I actually did some hunts with this setup, but eventually I just decided to make up for it by adding the requisite gems in my mantles. That way I could get to Blast level 4, and then Latent Power 3 when I have a mantle on. Anyway, I like this set too, and I decided to test it out against a scarred Yangaruga, and that was with just the Blast 3 and Latent Power 2, like I said earlier. On the plus side, this set totally destroyed the Tempered Crazy Bird. Garuga no likey the boom boom. It's really weak against Blast. I mean, I felt so bad for it, because it was just parts were just dropping left and right. And then, just like the first set, you can also switch in Destroyer Gems for the Blast Decos if you want to use this against Safi'jiiva, who also happens to have a 3-star weakness, I believe, to Blast as well. Anyway, I really like these 2 sets because I can pretty much hit unsoftened weak points like old school Monster Hunter and then never have to worry as much about softening or sharpening, as long as I'm hitting the right spots. And even when I miss the natural weak points, I can still usually finish most hunts without sharpening because I have enough of a buffer to do so. Otherwise, you can only sharpen when you're mounted and changing areas when the monster bleeds. But as far as the actual fighting, you never should be required to sharpen, which can be a pain when you're fighting a monster at that moment. And then naturally, I also have the option to soften when the opportunity arises, so it's like getting the best of both worlds. Honestly, about the only thing that bugs me about this is the waist, which is kind of skimpy. But hey, that's what layered armor is for. Anyway, there you go, my Affinity, Overkill, No-Sharpen, Critical Status, Master's Touch set. I think I just added another word to it. Overkill much? It's basically a fun, quality of life build that also has room for nice damage if you decide to further tweak it and swap certain skills, especially if you have better decorations than I do. So what status set do you use lately? As always, please feel free to leave any thoughts or questions you may have in the comment section. Once again, this is Anti-Safi'jiiva, and thank you for watching.